Life in a medieval monastery. Dark screens sleep history. Tonight, we will walk slowly into a world of stone walls, candlelight, woolen sleeves, and voices lowered by habit. A medieval monastery was not only a place of prayer. It was also a house, a workshop, a farm, a library, a school, a guest house, and sometimes a small hospital. It held many different kinds of time within its walls. The turning of the seasons, the rising and falling of daylight, the ringing of bells, and the steady repetition of tasks done carefully because they had been done before. We will not hurry through it. We will let the doors open one by one. We will notice the scrape of a wooden bench, the clean smell of rushes on the floor, the faint smoke of a lamp, and the colder air that waits in the cloister before morning. History can be dramatic, but this story is about the quieter side of it, the routines that made a day recognizable, the duties that returned like tides, and the calm discipline of people who lived by a rule. Medieval monasteries varied widely. A great Benedictine abbey in England was not exactly the same as a Cistercian house in Burgundy. A small Irish community, a double monastery, or a later urban friary. Customs changed from century to century, and wealthy houses could look very different from poor ones. But across much of medieval Europe, certain patterns repeated: prayer, reading, labor, hospitality, silence, meals, rest, and the careful keeping of communal life. So, as we move through this episode, imagine one monastery that borrows gently from many real places. Its stones have weathered rain for generations. Its gardens are practical rather than ornamental. Its books are precious because each page has passed through human hands. Its bells do not exist to startle, but to gather scattered attention back into one shared rhythm. And when the opening card fades, the screen will rest in darkness, while the old house continues quietly in the mind. Before the bell, long before sunrise, the monastery is already a map of sleeping shapes. In the dormitory, narrow beds or simple pallets line the room, and the air is cool enough that a brother may keep his cloak close, even indoors. Stone holds the night. Timber beams darken above. Somewhere, perhaps under the eaves, a bird shifts once and is still again. The monastery is not silent in the modern sense. It creaks, breathes, settles, and listens. The first office of the night may come very early, when the boundary between yesterday and today is still uncertain. A bell sounds, or a wooden clapper is struck, and the community begins to rise. No one reaches for a lamp switch. No glass window glows with electric light. A candle or a covered lantern has to be kindled, protected from drafts, carried carefully from one space to another. The dark is not an obstacle to be defeated. It is simply the weather of the hour. The Rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century and followed in many later houses, treated the day as something to be shaped. It did not imagine holiness as a single intense feeling, but as a long practice. Sleep, food, reading, correction, work, and prayer all had their place. Even rising from bed was part of the pattern. A monk did not belong entirely to private time. He belonged to the community, and the community belonged to the bell. There is a softness in this first movement. Feet find sandals. A sleeve is shaken loose. A belt is tied. The cold floor encourages wakefulness. In winter, breath may be visible near the door. In summer, the air may carry the smell of damp grass from the garth, the enclosed green at the center of the cloister. The brothers move without much speech, not because each moment is severe, but because silence preserves the shape of the hour. There is also the practical matter of clothing. A habit is not a costume in this world. It is daily, whether identity, obedience, warmth, and work garment at once. Wool can be heavy when damp and comforting when the air is sharp. The hood gathers the dark around the face. The belt keeps tools, keys, or small necessities close. To dress is to return to the pattern shared by everyone in the house. Outside the dormitory, the route to the church has been walked so many times that the body almost knows it without sight. A stair may be narrow. A passage may turn near the cloister. In some houses, the dormitory connected directly to the church for the night offices, so that sleepy bodies could pass from bed to prayer without crossing the whole cold yard. Architecture itself helped the rule become habit. So the chapter of Before the Bell passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces: a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. Matins in the dark, matins, or the night office, gathered the community into the church when the rest of the countryside still slept. The church was the heart of the monastery, not only because it was sacred, but because it gave direction to everything around it. Nave, choir, altar, side chapels, stone piers, painted walls, hanging lamps. All these features could vary, but the sense of entering a larger and older rhythm remained. The psalms were recited or sung in ordered sequence. Some monks knew long stretches by memory, and memory itself was an important medieval art. A text was not only something stored on a page. It could be stored in the body, in the mouth, in repeated sound, in the patient muscle of daily recitation. When a line returned again and again through the years, it became part of the architecture of the mind. Candles and oil lamps created small islands of gold. They did not flood the church with brightness. They allowed faces, columns, and book pages to appear and recede. Medieval darkness was textured. It could be dangerous on a road, comforting in a dormitory, solemn in a church, or useful for sleep. In the choir stalls, the dark pressed gently around the singers, and the sound rose into the roof like warm breath. For a sleepy listener, it may help to imagine that nothing in this scene needs to be solved. The Latin words may be understood by some and half understood by others. The melody moves slowly. A cantor begins, the others answer, and the verse passes back and forth like a lamp handed carefully from one person to another. Outside, fields wait under frost or moonlight. Inside, time is measured not by urgency, but by repetition. Books used for the offices could be large expensive, and shared. A choir book might rest on a stand, its letters broad enough to be read by several singers. Before print, even liturgical regularity depended on handwritten pages and trained memory. The sound of the office therefore carried the labor of scribes, parchment makers, binders, teachers, and generations of practice. A tired monk might struggle to remain attentive. Medieval sources knew this very well. Sleepiness, wandering thoughts, sore feet, and cold hands belonged to the real life of prayer. The point was not that every person felt inspired at every hour. The point was that the community carried the hour together. When one mind drifted, the chant continued. When one voice weakened, another held the line. So the chapter of Matins in the dark passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces, a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. Cloister and Chapter. After the early offices and later morning prayer, the monastery begins to open into its daytime pattern. The cloister is one of its most memorable spaces, a covered walkway surrounding a square of grass, herbs, or simple earth. From the cloister, doors lead to the church, the chapter house, the refectory, the dormitory stairs, and other working rooms. It is a practical corridor, but also a place of thought. The chapter house takes its name from the daily reading of a chapter of the rule. Here, the community gathers on benches along the walls. The abbot or prior may speak. Duties may be assigned. Faults may be confessed or corrected. News concerning the house may be shared. In a large monastery, this room could be finely vaulted, with carved capitals and a dignified entrance. In a smaller one, it might be plain, but the function was still central. Medieval community life required organization. It is easy to imagine monks only as solitary figures in prayer, but a monastery had to manage food stores, accounts, guests, lands, repairs, clothing, servants, animals, tenants, legal disputes, and relations with bishops, kings, nobles, and neighbors. The quiet life still had ledgers. The spiritual house also needed a cellarer, a sacrist, a librarian, an infirmarian, a guest master, and many hands for ordinary maintenance. The cloister listens to all of this without comment. Rain ticks on its roof. Sunlight moves slowly from one arcade to another. Sandaled feet pass over worn stone. A novice may stand with lowered eyes, learning where to go and when to speak. An older monk may pause by a pillar, not idle exactly, but momentarily released into stillness. In this small square, the world is both enclosed and present. The chapter house could be a place of tenderness as well as discipline. A novice might receive instruction there. A letter might be read from a distant house. The anniversary of a benefactor or departed brother might be remembered. Community is made not only by affection, but by repeated acts of noticing. Who is absent? Who is ill? Who needs correction? Who has completed a task? Whose name should be spoken today? In the cloister walk, reading could also take place. A monk might sit with a book during appointed hours, turning pages slowly, murmuring words under the breath. Medieval reading was often closer to tasting than scanning. The same sentence might be repeated, memorized, and carried into work. A passage could become company, while hands weeded, copied, swept, or mended. So the chapter of Cloister and Chapter passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces. A sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. The Scriptorium. The Scriptorium is one of the most beloved images of monastic life. A room of desks, sharpened quills, scraped parchment, ink horns, rulers, pigments, and careful hands. Not every monastery copied books in the same way or at every period, and some scriptoria were more active than others. Still, manuscript production remains one of the great quiet labors by which monasteries shaped medieval culture. Before a page could be written, an animal skin might be prepared as parchment. It was soaked, stretched, scraped, dried, cut, ruled, and folded. Paper became more common in parts of Europe later in the Middle Ages, but parchment remained durable and prestigious. A book was not casual. It represented money, labor, materials, and time. To copy a book was to build something page by page, line by line, breath by breath. The work could be cold. A scribe might write near a window for light, with fingers stiff in winter. Ink had to be mixed. Quills had to be mended. Mistakes had to be scraped away carefully with a knife, if the surface allowed it. Margins might receive corrections, glosses, small pointing hands, or in more decorated manuscripts, vines, animals, saints, initials, and gold. But even a plain working text had its own beauty. Regular columns, disciplined letters, a page laid out like a field newly furrowed. Silence in the Scriptorium was not empty. It contained the scratch of pens, the turning of leaves, the faint click of a knife, and the quiet concentration of people making memory visible. A manuscript could outlive the hand that wrote it by centuries. It could cross borders, survive fire, be hidden, stolen, sold, rebound, catalogued, digitized, and still carry a trace of the room where one person leaned close to make the next letter. Ink itself had a history. Some inks were made with oak galls, iron salts, gum, and water, producing a dark line that could bite into the page. Pigments might come from minerals, plants, insects, or trade routes that stretched far beyond the monastery wall. Blue, red, green, and gold on a manuscript page could therefore contain geography, mines, merchants, workshops, ports, and patient preparation. Not all writing was grand. Monasteries also produced and preserved charters, account rolls, lists, calendars, letters, sermons, rules, and practical notes. A book of saints might sit near a record of rents. A beautiful initial might live in the same institutional world as a dispute about a mill stream. The written word tied heaven, memory, law, property, and daily administration together in one surprisingly busy archive. So the chapter of the Scriptorium passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces: a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. Kitchen, garden, and bakehouse. Monastic life was spiritual, but it was never free from the needs of the body. Bread had to be baked. Vegetables had to be grown. Ale or small beer might be brewed. Fish could be kept for days when meat was avoided. Beans, peas, leeks, onions, cabbages, apples, pears, eggs, cheese, and herbs all belonged to the practical landscape of the house. The kitchen was warm when other rooms were cold, and it had its own discipline. The refectory, or dining hall, also followed order. Meals might be eaten in silence, while one brother read aloud from a pulpit or lectern. The reading could be scripture, saints' lives, sermons, or other approved texts. Eating was not treated as private entertainment. It was communal maintenance. Bowls, cups, knives, trenchers, benches, serving hatches, and the smell of soup created a different kind of prayer, not mystical, but ordinary and necessary. Gardens served many purposes. Some grew kitchen vegetables. Some grew medicinal herbs. Some provided flowers for the church. Monastery garden could include sage, rue, fennel, mint, rosemary, hyssop, parsley, lavender, or plants valued according to local knowledge and climate. Bees might be kept for wax as well as honey, because candles were essential. A good candle was not merely decoration, it was stored daylight. Imagine a brother in the garden after rain. The soil darkens his hands. The leaves hold droplets. Beyond the wall, village life continues. Carts, children, dogs, bargaining, grief, harvest, gossip, weather. Inside the wall, the same world is translated into rows, paths, beds, and duties. The monastery is separate, but not untouched. Every loaf carries the field with it. Every candle carries the hive. The bakehouse had its own rhythm, older than many written rules. Grain was ground, flour was measured, dough was kneaded, ovens were heated, and loaves were watched by experience more than by exact thermometers. Bread connected the monastery to fields, mills, weather, tenants, and laborers. A failed harvest could be felt at the table months later. A good harvest could become charity at the gate. Meals could change with the liturgical year. Fasting seasons altered what was served and how much. Feast days brought relief, ceremony, or better dishes. The calendar therefore entered the body through appetite. A monk knew Advent, Lent, Easter, harvest, and winter not only as ideas, but as flavors, absences, and returns. The table taught time in its own quiet way. So the chapter of kitchen, garden, and bakehouse passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces: a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. Guests at the gate. Hospitality was a major monastic obligation. The Rule of Benedict, famously says that all guests who arrive should be received as Christ. In practice, this did not mean that every visitor entered every part of the cloister. Monasteries distinguished between spaces for the community and spaces for outsiders. But travelers, pilgrims, messengers, poor people, and important guests all might come to the gate seeking food, lodging, news, or blessing. The gatehouse was a meeting point between enclosure and road. There might be a porter who listened, judged, welcomed, and sometimes refused. A guest master could arrange a bed, a meal, or a place near the fire. Noble visitor might expect better accommodation than a poor pilgrim, because medieval society carried hierarchy into nearly every room. Yet the ideal of hospitality remained, and many houses became known as places where the road could pause. A monastery could also give alms. Bread, leftovers, coins, medical attention, or simple shelter might be offered depending on resources and custom. Wealthy monasteries had obligations to the poor, though their record was mixed like all human institutions. Some were generous, some were burdened, some became entangled with power and property. Sleepy history does not need to make everything perfect. It can let the contradictions rest where they are. At the gate, news enters. A bridge has washed out. A lord has died. A fair is opening. A relic is traveling. A war has moved closer or farther away. A strange illness has appeared in a nearby town. The monastery hears these things and absorbs them slowly. Behind the walls, the bell still rings for prayer. At the threshold, the world keeps knocking. Pilgrims especially brought stories. Some carried badges from shrines, scallop shells, staffs, or small tokens showing where they had been. Their feet might be blistered, their cloaks stained by road dust, their accounts embellished by exhaustion and hope. A monastery on a traveled route could become part of a chain of mercy, one night of shelter among many uncertain nights. Important guests could disrupt the house. A bishop, noble patron, royal official, or wealthy traveler might arrive with horses, attendants, expectations, and news. Hospitality had to be generous without dissolving the order of the community. The guest house was therefore both welcome and boundary. It allowed the monastery to open a door without turning the cloister into a marketplace. So the chapter of guests at the gate passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces: a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. Fields, fish ponds, and bees. Many monasteries were landholders. Some owned fields, mills, woods, vineyards, sheep pastures, salt rights, fishing waters, or tenant farms. The ideal monk might be imagined with book and psalter, but the institution around him could be economically complex. Lay brothers, servants, hired workers, tenants, and villagers often did much of the heavy labor, especially in large houses. A monastery was both spiritual community and a state manager. Cistercian houses, in particular, became known for remote sites: sheep farming, water management, and granges, though reality varied by place and century. Monastic landscapes were shaped by ditches, ponds, barns, mills, walls, orchards, and tracks. Water was especially important for drinking, washing, brewing, cooking, powering mills, carrying waste away, and keeping fish. A well-planned monastery listened to water as carefully as to bells. Fish ponds are a peaceful image for a sleep history episode. Their surfaces hold sky and reeds. Carp or other fish move slowly below. On fasting days or meatless days, fish could become an important part of the table. Nearby, bees move through herbs and fruit blossom. Their wax becomes light for the church. Their honey sweetens medicine or food. Small creatures become part of a great daily system. The fields around the monastery change the story by season. In spring, plowing and sowing. In summer, haymaking and long light. In autumn, harvest, apples, smoke, stored grain. In winter, repairs, accounts, dark mornings, preserved food, and the steady care of animals. The monastery does not float above time. It is tied to weather, mud, drought, frost, and the patient hope that the next crop will come. The mill was another place where the monastery touched the wider economy. Water turning a wheel could grind grain with a force no human arm could match for long. The sound of a mill is steady and useful. Creak, rush, turn, grind. If the monastery owned mill rights, local people might be required to bring grain there, which could make the house both service provider and landlord. Woods mattered too. They offered timber, fuel, pannage for pigs, leaf litter, bark, nuts, and boundaries. Managed woodland was a slow form of planning. A tree cut in one generation might have been planted or protected by another. The monastery, concerned with eternity in its prayers, also had to think in the earthly timescale of beams, roofs, carts, fences, and firewood. So the chapter of fields, fish ponds, and bees passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces, a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. The infirmary and the herb garden. Illness was part of monastic life, as it was part of every medieval life. The infirmary offered a place where sick or elderly members of the community could rest under a slightly different rule. They might receive better food, more warmth, or exemption from some duties. The infirmarian had to combine compassion, discipline, and the medical knowledge available in the house. Medieval medicine drew from many streams. Classical authors such as Galen and Hippocrates, as transmitted and interpreted through centuries, local plant knowledge, monastic experience, prayer, diet, bleeding, bathing, oils, syrups, poultices, and sometimes remedies that now seem symbolic or strange. It is easy to judge the past too quickly. It is better, for a quiet moment, to imagine people doing what they could with the tools they had. The herb garden near the infirmary might contain plants used for digestion, sleep, wounds, coughs, fevers, or scent. Cleanliness mattered, though not in the modern germ theory sense. Fresh linens, Warmed rooms, good broth, clean water, and rest could be powerful forms of care. A sick monk might hear the offices from a distance, the bell through a wall, the chant softened by stone, the footsteps of someone bringing a cup. A monastery also cared for memory at the end of life. The dead were prayed for, named, recorded, and buried. Necrologies and calendars preserved anniversaries. A grave in the monastic cemetery placed one life within the longer life of the community. Even loss was given a rhythm. Even grief was held by repeated words. Care of the elderly could soften the strictness of the rule. A brother who had risen for night offices for 40 years might now need help crossing the room. His memory might hold chants from abbots long dead. Younger monks could see in him their own future, and the house could measure its charity by how gently it treated those who could no longer contribute much labor. The infirmary chapel, where present, allowed the sick to remain near the prayer of the community. Even when someone could not stand in choir, the rhythm did not abandon him. This is one of the quiet strengths of communal life. A person may be weak, but the pattern continues nearby, offering a structure when private strength is low. So the chapter of the infirmary and the herb garden passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces: a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. Vespers and Compline. As evening approaches, the monastery changes color. Work slows. Tools are put away. The kitchen prepares what is needed. The church receives the community again for Vespers, the evening office. Outside, swallows may move over the roofline. Smoke may rise from a village hearth. The west side of the cloister catches the last light, and carved stone seems briefly warmer than it is. Vespers is not the end of the day, but it begins the descent. The psalms return. The voice that was used for instruction, correction, and work is returned to singing. Monastic time is circular without being empty. The same offices repeat, but the person who hears them is not exactly the same. The body is older than it was yesterday. The season has shifted. One more page has been copied. One more guest has left. One more loaf has been eaten. Compline is the final office before sleep. Its mood is protective. Doors close. Lamps are checked. The dormitory gathers the community again. The words before sleep ask for guarding through the night, for peace, for rest from fear. In a world without modern lighting, the night had real power. A monastery did not pretend otherwise. It met the dark with habit, prayer, and practical care. After Compline, speech may be restricted until morning. The great silence begins. This is one of the most restful images in the whole day, not a silence of emptiness, but a silence agreed upon by everyone in the house. The last sandals pass over stone. A latch settles. A candle is pinched out. The monastery returns to the deep breathing of its walls. The movement from day to night also brought practical checks. Fires had to be made safe. Animals had to be secured. Doors had to be barred. A lamp might be left where needed. The sacrist might care for vessels, vestments, candles, and books used in the church. Holiness did not remove fire risk, theft risk, or the ordinary need to know where the keys were. In the dormitory, the return to bed repeats the opening of the episode in reverse. The same room, once stirred by the bell, now receives tired bodies again. The day has passed through prayer, work, food, reading, correction, conversation at the gate, and silence. Each person carries a slightly different version of it, but the house gathers them into the same dark. So the chapter of Vespers and Compline passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces: a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. What remains in stone? Many medieval monasteries now survive as ruins, parish churches, schools, houses, museums, place names, manuscripts, and fragments of carved stone. Some were dissolved in political and religious upheaval. Some declined slowly. Some still live as religious communities. Others stand roofless, with grass where the choir once was, and birds crossing the open air above broken arches. A ruin can feel peaceful because it removes the noise of administration and leaves only shape. But the original house was full of activity. Bells rang, arguments happened, accounts were kept, novices made mistakes, abbots negotiated, cooks sweated, scribes corrected lines, guests complained, sick people coughed, rain leaked through roofs. The past was not a painting, it was lived. Still, stone remembers certain things well. A worn step remembers feet. A piscina remembers water used near an altar. A cloister arcade remembers processions. A grave slab remembers a name, even when weather has almost taken it away. Manuscripts remember hands even more intimately. A change in ink, a tired abbreviation, a note in the margin, a small drawing made by someone who may not have expected to be noticed. When we think of a medieval monastery tonight, we can let it be neither fantasy nor lecture. It can be a calm reconstruction, a way of imagining how people organized time before clocks ruled every pocket, how they made light before electricity, how they treated books before printing made them numerous, and how a community tried, imperfectly, to shape ordinary days around something larger than itself. Modern visitors often meet monasteries through atmosphere first. A ruined arch against a gray sky can make the past feel calmer than it was. Grass softens foundations. Labels simplify conflicts. Gift shops sit where workshops or yards once stood. Yet even this modern quiet has value. It gives us enough stillness to ask how the place worked when the roof was whole and the bell was not imagined, but heard. Archaeology adds humble details to the story: drain channels, animal bones, pottery shards, floor tiles, window glass, keys, buckles, styluses, burials, garden traces, and the foundations of buildings no chronicle bothered to describe. Such evidence reminds us that history, is not only kings and abbots. It is also broken cups, worn thresholds, repaired walls, and the shape left by daily use. So the chapter of what remains in stone passes without hurry. We have only followed the ordinary traces: a sound, a task, a doorway, a little weather, and the human need to make a day hold together. The monastery is not frozen in time. It continues quietly around us, room after room, as the bell prepares to lead us onward. Soft ending. Now the monastery settles again into night. The guest house is quiet. The fish ponds hold the last reflection of the sky. The herb garden darkens into scent more than color. In the scriptorium, the ink dries on a page that may travel farther than its writer ever will. In the church, the lamps burn low, and the stone keeps the memory of song. The bell will ring again. Before dawn, sleeves will be found, sandals will touch the floor, and the old pattern will begin once more. But for now, there is nothing to do. The gate is closed. The cloister is empty. The dormitory is still. Rain may come, or frost, or a clear moon above the roof tiles. The monastery rests inside its wall, and the road outside rests too. If you are listening in the dark, you can leave the house of stone there at a gentle distance. You do not have to remember every room. You can keep only a few quiet things: the bell, the candle, the page, the garden, the loaf, the pool, the final door closing softly after Compline. Let those small images become slower and simpler as the night deepens. There is no need now to decide whether monastic life was peaceful or difficult, generous or flawed, beautiful or severe. It was all of these, because human institutions always are. For sleep, we can set down judgment and keep the gentler knowledge that people once built houses where time was rung by bells, books were copied by hand, and the night office carried voices into the dark. Let the images become fewer: a cloister walk under rain, a candle beside a page, a loaf cooling near the oven, bees asleep in their hive, a fish pond under the moon, a final whispered prayer, a wool sleeve folded over the edge of a bed, stone holding the day's warmth for a little while, then letting it go. And as this story fades, may your own room become easier to inhabit. May the day loosen its hold. May thoughts that have been walking the roads come in through the gate, receive a little bread and warmth, and then grow quiet. The old monastery keeps watch for a while. You may rest.